Alright, so today I want to take a little walk down memory lane. I want to show you what the ball python industry looked like just 5 years ago when I started in ball pythons. And I actually went over to Morphmarket.com and I looked up some of the snakes that I've purchased along the way, and I looked at the prices from 5 years ago compared to the prices today for the same snake, and I think you'd be pretty amazed at how the prices really jump around. Some of those have actually almost doubled in price. Some of them have dropped significantly. As a matter of fact, if you had invested in the wrong snake or the wrong combination of genes, you could have lost a lot of money over the last 5 years. And believe it or not, there's a few that have really kept their value, are pretty much the same price today as they were 5 years ago, which is pretty amazing. So today I want to jump over the internet and I want to show you the difference in prices from 5 years ago compared to the same ball pythons if you were to buy them today. Alright, so I'm going to jump over here on Morphmarket.com and I want to start with this snake right here. This is a blue-eyed leucistic, an all-white snake with blue eyes. Pretty much everybody's favorite ball pythons. When I'm selling snakes at the reptile shows, everybody comes up to my table and they're like, hey, can I hold a white snake with the blue eyes? And usually the blue-eyed leucistics are pretty much the same price across the board. There's about 40 different ways you can actually make a blue-eyed leucistic. You need 2 genes in the blue-eyed leucistic complex to make an all-white snake. So this actually has the combination of the lesser and the Mojave. You could actually use a bunch of other genes. You can actually make a super lesser or a super Mojave. You can have a lesser Russo, Mojave Russo. Pretty much the only exception to that would really change the price is if you added bamboo to your blue-eyed leucistic. Bamboo is a little bit more expensive just as a standalone gene. And when you start making, for example, if you actually had a bamboo lesser, just because it had bamboo in it, a lot of times it'll increase the price significantly. But I'd say pretty much for all other blue-eyed leucistics are going to be pretty much the same price across the board. And I actually pulled up this one from way back, and this actually sold in 2016, quite a while ago. This is when I first started in ball pythons, and this one actually sold for $350. And the first, I'd say first 2 or 3 years when I was in ball pythons, I'd say probably all the blue-eyed leucistics were selling pretty much for anywhere from $300 to about $350 across the board. So here is another blue-eyed leucistic, one of the more recent ones that I pulled out. And it's kind of interesting with the blue-eyed leucistics, you can actually have other possible genes in the blue-eyed leucistic, and usually you can't tell if they're in there because the white snake will completely mask all the other genes. A lot of times you can actually get a good deal on a blue-eyed leucistic because it has all these other possible genes that you don't know if it's in there for sure. And a lot of times they'll sell them just the same price as a regular blue-eyed leucistic. And the only way to know that if they're in there or not is to grow this snake up and then breed it to something else and look at the hatchlings to see if those genes are in your blue-eyed leucistic. So take a look at this. This is actually one of the more recent ones. This actually is still for sale for $600. And I've actually seen some recent blue-eyed leucistics selling for $700 or $750 just for a simple blue-eyed leucistic. It's pretty amazing. It seemed like for the first 3 years, they really held their price up until about 3 years ago. And it seemed like all of a sudden, just overnight, they pretty much doubled in price. And now it even seems like they're slowly increasing over the last little bit here. It's pretty wild how these just keep getting more and more expensive. So here's a snake that if you actually invested the full price back when I started in ball pythons, you would be crying in your coffee because you would have lost so much money. The price drop on this is like nothing that I've actually seen. And this is a scaleless head ball python. And the scaleless head has just a few scales missing from the top of the head. And if you breed 2 scaleless heads together, you'll actually get a completely scaleless ball python, which just strips all the scales from the entire snake. And it seemed like one of the hottest projects, and everybody was getting into it, and everybody bought up the original scaleless heads for a lot of money, an incredible amount of money, and they bred them really quick through their whole collection. As a matter of fact, about 3 years ago, I'd say maybe 2 years ago, I went to some of the big reptile shows like the NARBC, and it seemed like everybody's table, almost every single snake and a lot of tables was a scaleless head combination. Everyone was working this into a lot of combinations, and the snakes were really expensive. expensive back then. And take a look at the original price. When I first saw this, this actually sold back in 2014 for $45,000, which was pretty incredible. And if you actually look at the prices today, I pulled up a scaleless head over here over on Morphmarket. This is one of the more recent ones. This is gonna blow you away. Take a look at the price now. You can actually buy a scaleless head today for $250. That's the biggest price crash that I've ever seen in any ball python gene. It's pretty amazing. So here is the albino pied. I remember when I first got into ball pythons, the albino pied was pretty expensive. I ended up buying one for pretty much the same price that I saw them when I first started in ball pythons. And now I'd say they've dropped a little bit, but they're still holding their price pretty good. So the original price on these, this was actually $1,250. I think I paid $1,200 for mine a couple years ago, which was pretty typical for an albino pied. It's a little bit more difficult of a combination because you have two recessives. The albino's recessive and the pied's recessive. So one of the more difficult things is if you actually took this really beautiful snake and you bred it to a normal, all the offspring would come out as normal looking ball pythons. You couldn't reproduce this. They'd all have one copy of the albino gene, one copy of the pied gene, and you'd have to breed them back to get some visuals, which is, it's kind of a challenging project. So take a look at this. I actually pulled up another albino pied from one of the more recent ads. If you look at the difference in the prices, this one is actually for sale for $850, although I have seen some for significantly less. As a matter of fact, I've seen some for like in the 700s and 600s, kind of going down. Sometimes the prices can be all over the place. I'd say this is kind of the average to the high-end price as far as the albino pied. And kind of the interesting thing about this is if you actually come over here on Morphmarket, you'll see that some people are producing an incredible number of albino pieds. And if, as a matter of fact, if you actually see one of these and you're like, hey, I'm going to invest in that project because it's holding its price really good over the last few years, and you end up producing hundreds of albino pieds and you try to sell them over here on Morphmarket to try to flood the market, let me tell you, the prices will definitely go down based on, it's pretty much based on supply and demand. So if you actually took one of these, any of these, and you produced a whole bunch of them, like the scaleless head, and you produce, you know, thousands and thousands of scaleless heads, of course the prices are going to significantly decrease because people will be competing for the best price. And if there's a lot of them on the market, it really drives the price down. So here is the bamboo like Bobby that I have around my neck at the beginning and the end of every video. That is a bamboo ball python. And the bamboo, as a matter of fact, when the bamboo first came out, I kind of heard rumors that the very first bamboo sold for over $100,000, which is kind of wild. And they were really expensive when I first got into ball pythons. As a matter of fact, here back in 2015, I started in about 2016. I think in 2015, I was just kind of interested in ball pythons. And I really started investing heavily back in 2016. And let me tell you, at the time, I could not afford a bamboo ball python. They were selling for $2,000 back in 2015. And I actually pulled up one here that from a more recent ad over here, and it seems like the bamboos are really variable. This one is still for sale for $350 with another 50 ships, so it's like $400. I've actually seen bamboos selling for, you know, $500, $550, you know, pretty much in that range. I haven't seen them much below $350. I'd say this is kind of the lower end as far as bamboo. And it seems like a lot of the bamboos, they sell really fast as soon as they post over here, which seems like it's driving the price up for the bamboos. As a matter of fact, when I first started producing bamboos, I was selling them for $250 for the first year, and they went super fast. And then I started increasing the price year after year, and it seems like they're really popular, and these are really increasing in price, which is pretty amazing. So here's another one that I was drooling over when I first got into ball pythons, and that is the combination of the banana and the clown. They are pretty reasonable now, but I actually pulled this up over here. This is an ad from 2016, and look at how much they were back in 2016. $4,750. They're like $5,000 for banana clown. I was like, man, I really want one, but there's no way I'm going to spend $5,000 for a banana clown. As a matter of fact, I actually recently just just bought a banana Anchi clown about 2 years ago. They actually dropped significantly. So take a look at this. I pulled up another banana clown over here, one of the more recent ads, $750. That is definitely my price range compared to $5,000, which I can't believe how much the banana clowns have really come down. So here's one that I wanted for quite a while. I had my eye on this for years, a pinstripe hide. And kind of the interesting thing about this is that this is kind of an unusual combination, and there's not very many of them over here at Morphmarket. And I saw a few of these pop up. You know, the pinstripe is one of my favorite combinations, and then working it in with pied, you get like this gold, bronze, metallic looking pied combination, which is pretty amazing. And when they first started coming out back in 2015, they're selling for about $650, which was pretty reasonable. And if you actually take a look at one of the more recent ones, here's another pinstripe pie that I found. $675, pretty much exactly the same price. And kind of the weird thing about this is I actually bought a female pinstripe hide. I think it's been about 3 years since I bought that one. And I was looking at these for the first couple years, and there was a couple of them on the market and they sold, and it was like 2 years before anyone had listed a pinstripe hide over here on Morphmarket. They just completely dried up and there weren't any. And someone actually listed one. I think they were like $750 or $800 or something like that. And I jumped on that pinstripe hide because I was waiting for one for years. And then after I bought that one, it seemed like they dried up again for quite a while. And now if you actually come over here, of course, there's like, you know, 250,000 ball pythons over here on Morphmarket, and you can pretty much get anything you want now. There's a lot of different snakes over here and a lot of choices you can actually invest in. And when I started over here on Morphmarket in 2016, I think the very first snakes that were posted over here were posted in the end of 2014. So it was only like maybe a year or a year and a half that people were posting snakes over here. I think there was only like maybe 30,000 snakes over here when I started. Not a whole lot to actually choose from. So here's another one that's really held its value for a really long time. As a matter of fact, the albino was one of the very first genes in ball pythons before all the other genes came on the scene. And if you actually look at the albino, which is a recessive gene, back in 2014, take a look at this. They were selling for $200 back in 2014. If you actually look at the difference between the prices over here in the current year, well, this is actually from 2020. It just turned 2021 now. So we are just in the beginning of 2021, but the prices are, as a matter of fact, they've actually increased to about $300 for albinos. As a matter of fact, it's pretty much across the board, like all the base genes, like the recessives, like the clowns and the pies and everything, you really can't get them for $200. It's pretty much, you know, everything, especially for recessives, is usually at least $300, $350. I think just because of the demand and how beautiful the albinos look just as a standalone gene. All right, so here's the last one I wanted to show you, and that is the combination of the lesser and the clown. So I bought a lesser clown combination later on in my Ball Python journey, and take a look at this. This was back in 2016. This one sold for $1,000, and I think for mine, I think I paid about $950 for my lesser clown, which is pretty expensive, pretty on par to what they started out with back in 2016. And if you actually look at some of the more recent lesser clowns, and kind of the interesting thing with the lesser clowns is it really seems the prices really vary a lot. It seems like the quality of your lesser clown really kind of can change the price. If you have a really nice example of a lesser clown hatchling, a lot of people that are like, hey, this is the best lesser clown I've ever seen, I want to bump the price by a few $100s, and it seems like it's been working with the lesser clown. But if you actually take a look at some of the current prices, this one is still for sale for about $750, so not too bad of a drop for the lesser clowns. And it seems like it's almost like the stock market. You don't know which one's going to go up or which one's going to go down. And I think a lot of it is supply and demand. And it's kind of interesting over the years, all the different genes and combinations, how they really go up and down. Some of it's pretty unpredictable. I think it really depends on who's investing in these projects and how many hatchlings they're producing with certain combinations. Alright, so it is time for the question of the day. And Brenda Kirk asks, has anyone developed a genetic test to figure out the genes in ball pythons, or do they just go by the colors and patterns? And that is a very good question. And as far as I know, I don't think anyone has developed a genetic test, but wouldn't it be awesome if you could do a test and figure out exactly what genes are in your ball pythons? Especially, I've actually seen some people where they'll take a ball python with 5 or 6 genes and they'll breed it to another ball python with 5 or 6 genes, and they'll get a whole bunch of offspring with like 10 or 11 or 12 genes in that ball python. They can't figure out which genes are in any of their offspring. They can't identify any of the offspring. And let me tell you, that can be a pretty frustrating project. And especially if you're working genes into a blue-eyed leucistic, the all-white snake with blue eyes will completely mask all the other genes. So wouldn't it be nice if we had a genetic test to figure out which genes were in that blue-eyed leucistic? And probably the best way that you could do it, that I was kind of, as a matter of fact, I was actually thinking about this, you could probably take the shed from the ball python and use that as the genetic material to do DNA testing on the snake. I don't know where else you'd actually obtain the genetic information. It's not like you could like pluck a feather or anything from your snake. I don't think you could pluck a scale without hurting the snake. I don't think you could actually do a mouth swab without potentially doing some damage because they have so many teeth in their mouth. But I think the shed skin might be the key to a future genetic test, which would be pretty awesome. So that is pretty much it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.